The 2012 London Olympics and 2016 Rio Olympics both cost over $13 billion, while the 2020 Tokyo Games ran over $20 billion. In every case, the bill for hosting the Olympics has turned out to be dramatically higher than originally budgeted. In fact, a study by the University of Oxford found that since 1976, the average cost overrun was an insane 252%. But why is this? What makes hosting the Olympics so expensive? Or at least much more expensive than everyone plans for? Well, to answer that, we have to start from where the costs originally begin, before you even know if you're going to be hosting it, aka the bidding process.
Paris 24, Los Angeles 28.
This starts about 7 to 10 years before the actual games begin. Hopeful cities often spend in excess of $100 million within 2 years in employing consultant firms, legal experts, city planners, and really everyone needed to bolster their proposals. The process begins like this. Interested cities submit an application to the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, through their own National Olympic Committee. Immediately following these bid submissions, applicants are then required to complete a questionnaire covering essential aspects of successfully hosting the Games within 6 months. Since the turn of the century, between 11 and 14 general themes have been featured on those questionnaires, from general infrastructure to sporting venues to environmental factors and more. Each individual file is evaluated by the IOC delegates, who provide a weighted score. Within the scoring system, if an applicant scores less than 6 out of 10, their bid is considered unsuccessful. In the scenario where there are more than 5 applicants with a score of 6 and above, the highest scores progress to a second round, therefore becoming candidates, capped at around 4 to 5 cities. Then the second round begins, where those candidates must submit a more detailed questionnaire to the IOC Evaluation Commission, with a week-long site inspection following. Based on all this, the Evaluation Commission compiles a comprehensive report, which is then distributed to IOC members, who vote for their preferred host city. Once the votes are tallied and a winner is announced, the selected city is presented with the host city contract to sign, officially confirming their status as the host of the upcoming Olympic Games. This is just where it all begins though. Now that a city is chosen, we move on to the next stage, actual preparation. See, inside this contract is over 200 pages of obligations for the host city, setting the framework for how to revamp their city for the Games. Key elements include the opening and closing ceremonies, media provisions, transport infrastructure, security, an athletes' village, sporting venues, and so much more. In addition to the requirements defined by the IOC, sporting venues must comply with the specifications and standards set by the respective international federation for each sport. In short, this contract guides the planning for the eventual master plan, the document which outlines exactly how the host city's organizing committee will go about achieving the outcomes set by the contract. This is the roadmap which hosts use to prepare for the Olympics. But a better way for us to understand all this is if we look at real-world examples. So let's do just that by looking at a few of the most recent Summer Olympics. Starting off with the 2008 edition in Beijing, which cost $6.8 billion. 3 main venues were constructed: the Beijing National Stadium, the Aquatic Center, and the Beijing National Indoor Stadium. The Beijing National Stadium, famously nicknamed the Bird's Nest, was constructed at a cost of $430 million. This colossal architectural masterpiece served as the centerpiece for the Games, going far and above the requirements made by the host city contract, including the now famous $100 million opening ceremony, which was hosted in the stadium. Conveniently located less than half a mile away, the Aquatic Center, commonly known as the Water Cube, hosted the swimming and diving events. This venue required an additional $140 million investment, considerably more than the 18,000-seater Beijing National Indoor Stadium. All 3 of the stadiums mentioned are without a doubt both architectural and engineering marvels. Each venue combines top-tier aesthetic qualities with cultural significance, without sacrificing any of the practical functionality. Now, if you were to look at the transportation side of things, the before and after maps of the Beijing subway network tells you everything you need to know. It's funny to think about, given Beijing, and really China overall, are now marveled for their public transportation infrastructure. But during their bid, Beijing scored well below average on the infrastructure aspects of the questionnaire, thereby prompting the organizing committee into action, and from day 1 onwards began developing roadmaps on how best to meet the IOC's list of requirements. In preparation for the millions of Olympic visitors, Beijing more than doubled its metro network. You see, up until 2001, before Beijing won the bid, The rail system consisted of only 2 operational lines. 7 new lines were added, as well as 80 stations to the existing 64. An airport link was also included in the project. Beijing's subway and airport expansion projects had budgets of $7.7 and $3.5 billion respectively, and it didn't even end there. The city purchased 2,500 buses, plus 4,500 minibuses, and designated 38 bus routes. These public transport expansions came good before the games even started. You see, another particularly scrutinized aspect of Beijing's bid, related to environmental conditions, is air quality in particular. To address these concerns, the city implemented ambitious environmental initiatives aimed at reducing pollution and improving air quality. Speaking of air, now is a good time to mention the sponsor of this video, Fume. Now, we all know how bad vaping and smoking is for ourselves, and as a result, we've seen the rise of flavored air becoming an alternative to them, and Fume is the leader in the flavored air category, representing a whole movement towards better habits. What you see here has no vapor, no nicotine, no batteries, nothing. It's purely an award-winning flavored air device. With it, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, vapor, or combustion. Fume is even backed by doctors in the US and consistently invests in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products. So it's the real deal. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code VERST to get your free Fume base when you order the Journey Pack. It's the all-new magnetic stand for your Fume device. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use the code VERST or scan the QR code on screen to get it today. Now, these air quality initiatives included measures such as strict vehicle emission standards, temporary factory closures, and restrictions on construction activities during the games. The total investment in environmental measures amounted to billions of dollars, contributing to a greener and more sustainable Olympic Games. With the IOC's emphasis on legacy and sustainability, the investments into infrastructure is clearly bearing fruit, and the long-term benefits are still serving the community today. Prior to the Olympics, Beijing's public transport system serviced 1.7 billion rides. Today, that figure is at 8.7 billion, while the Beijing Olympics technically only was $6.8 billion in sports-related costs. If you add these things, which China sees as investments rather than part of Olympic costs, the number is actually close to $40 billion. Costs relating to security obviously fall into the latter bracket. The host city contract dedicates a substantial portion to security, evident in the fact that recent Olympic Games have placed more and more emphasis on security and law enforcement presence. Beijing took no chances in order to ensure a secure event, spending over $3 billion on security operations. Surface-to-air missiles were installed across the city, while 74 military aircrafts, 48 helicopters, and 33 naval vessels were placed on standby. Reportedly, 110,000 police were stationed in Beijing. Added to that was 1.4 million security volunteers and 300,000 surveillance volunteers. Next, we have the 2012 London Olympics, costing $15 billion. They have even more to show when it comes to preparing, especially considering that this was their third time. For their sporting venue requirements, iconic locations such as Wembley Stadium and Wimbledon were used for football and tennis competitions, while Hyde Park was used for the triathlon and open water swimming events. Despite the abundance of existing venues, the specialized requirements outlined by the host city contract led to the Olympic Delivery Authority to deem construction of the 80,000-seater Olympic Stadium necessary. In total, the stadium cost just over $1 billion and hosted opening and closing ceremonies as well as athletics. Similar to the availability of prospective venues, London's status as a global city is in no small part thanks to their insanely well-designed infrastructure. I mean, London's transport system is a tourist destination on its own. Despite this, London still spent around $10.5 billion on upgrades to the entire system. The Transport for London, or the TfL, carried out numerous projects in preparation, expanding various lines and ensuring their bus network was completely accessible. They also created the Olympic Javelin trains, which were also integrated into London's network, carrying passengers from central London to Olympic Park in 7 minutes. In terms of security preparation, well, the day after being awarded the Olympic Games on the 6th of July 2005, the city experienced one of its deadly militant attacks in history. This prompted a serious effort to guarantee a safe event, so London was heavily armed for it. 13,000 police officers were supported by 17,000 members of the armed forces and 10,000 security guards, provided by private security firms. cost overruns of 255% forced the UK government to double the security budget twice. Total spending eventually cleared $1.6 billion in one of Britain's biggest ever security operations, including a total 40,000 security operation personnel. Next, we have Rio 2016, the first city in South America to ever host the Olympics, costing about $13 billion. During Rio de Janeiro's bid, they scored terribly in the general infrastructure and transport concept categories, so they had to have a massive touch-up. Rio integrated and developed 3 modes of transport: bus, rapid transit, the metro, and the light vehicle rail system, essentially doubling public transport infrastructure. 77 miles of exclusive bus corridors with 125 stations and more than 10 miles of metro lines were added. For those who wanted something greener, bike paths spanning 250 miles were developed, as the largest cycling network in Latin America. $4 billion was spent on urban and environmental projects in the port area of Rio. Addressing the IOC's environmental concerns, Guanabara Bay, in which the sailing and windsurfing events took place, underwent a massive cleanup project. Uncollected trash entering via the heavily polluted rivers had created major environmental concerns. Prior to the cleanup efforts, only 17% of Rio's sewage was treated. There was literally raw sewage that had leaked into the bay. Cleanup efforts cost a further $200 million. Rio also faced intense scrutiny over safety prior to hosting the Olympics. Crime problems were highlighted by the media, who expressed concerns relating to security issues. Nearly 22,000 military personnel were added to the national public security in order to mitigate those fears. And finally, of course, who can forget the renovations of the iconic Maracana Stadium, costing over $500 million. Rio then spent triple that on the upgrades and extensions to Barra Olympic Park, previously used during the 2007 Pan American Games. A third cluster, Deodoro Park, was built for a further $1 billion and hosted various events. Lastly, Rio faced another unique challenge in that leading up to the Games, media attention had become increasingly concerned with Russian state-sponsored doping, given how heavily they broke the rules during the 2012 Olympics, having a record 18 medals stripped at a single Olympic Games, along with there being similar drama during the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics too. To address this, $60 million was spent on the construction and operational requirements of the Brazilian Doping Control Laboratory. Despite minimal existing infrastructure, the organizing committee reassured IOC members that all major project investments would leave a transformative legacy for Rio's 6.5 million residents. The 2020 Tokyo Olympics, which of course actually took place in 2021, was a bit different obviously due to the pandemic. This represented a second go at hosting the Summer Olympics, following the 1964 edition. Major renovations to 1964's main venue, the National Stadium, covered the needs of the Olympics. The stadium formed part of the Heritage Zone, located within Tokyo's central business area. This zone included 4 refurbished venues originally used in 1964. The second zone, Tokyo Bay Zone, consisted of 13 venues covering 15 sports. Most of these venues were built for the Games. Standouts were the Tokyo Aquatic Center and Oi Hockey Stadium. Construction and renovation costs eventually came to just under $3 billion. Before the disruptions, Tokyo had planned more extensive investments into upgrades for its metro system, but obviously they didn't end up being needed. Regardless, they would probably have absorbed the Olympic crowd well enough. Before the pandemic though, figuring out where all those visiting tourists would sleep was of some concern. In addition to the 10 million expected visitors, Tokyo's host city contract required that the hosts provide 40,000 plus hotel rooms for delegates affiliated with the IOC. During their planning phase, this caused quite a panic. That staggering demand was the equivalent to nearly half of all the city's hotel rooms. In fact, the hosts were so concerned about accommodation requirements that prior to the events which prohibited international spectators, they had planned to dock cruise ships in Tokyo Bay as makeshift hotels. But ultimately, this never came to be for obvious reasons. The unique, unprecedented situation may have robbed Tokyo of its tourists, but despite the limitations, they were still able to create a memorable viewing experience by leveraging advanced technology to ensure seamless coverage. At the heart of all the broadcast operations was the International Broadcast Center, established and operated by the Olympic Broadcasting Services. Located in the Tokyo Big Sight Convention Center, the IBC served as the main venue for international broadcasters to receive and distribute Olympic footage. Considering in normal Olympics years, TV revenue contributes to over 70% of all income during the Games. The circumstances of this event in particular required that Tokyo's technological prowess needed to be adequately prepared. Media operations, all aspects included, cost Tokyo an estimated $1.15 billion. Total costs reached $15.4 billion in the end officially, with an actual cost of closer to $25 billion, making Tokyo 2020 the most expensive Olympic event in history. Lastly, there's the most recent 2024 Paris Olympics. This Olympics started out a bit different, because 3 out of the 5 candidates withdrew their bids, leaving just Paris and Los Angeles. Circumstances eventually led to both being awarded as hosts. Paris in 2024, LA in 2028. Both cities were attractive options in any case, largely due to their existing infrastructure. As we've seen, preparing to host the Games is drastically more challenging when most of the requirements need to be built from scratch. Paris offered the IOC an option which, like London, already has most of what's needed in place. One such example can be found in the northwest of Paris, the legendary Yves Dumanoir Stadium, central to the 1924 Paris Olympics. Fast forward a century and the site has been renovated to host hockey events. Roland Garros, home of the French Open, hosts tennis and boxing, while France's many international football and rugby stadiums host various events. Famous landmarks will also be utilized: beach volleyball underneath the Eiffel Tower, fencing at the Grand Palais, and archery at the Esplanade des Invalides. Only 3 new facilities will be built: a media center, the Saint-Denis Aquatic Center, and the Athletes Village. Now, although Paris's railway network ranks as one of the world's best, it's also one of the busiest on any given day. Therefore, given that 15 million visitors are expected, which is more than double the existing population of 12 million residents represented in the Greater Paris area, it makes perfect sense that railway upgrades would be a necessity. In this scenario, the planning committee had suggested upgrades that were given the green light. Those transit improvements improve the Games as well as the future of Paris. Paris is also eager to showcase its cycling transformation, ensuring that every Olympic venue can be reached by bike, providing 257 miles of new cycle lanes and 20,000 bicycle parking spaces. The hope is that this initiative will leave a legacy of sustainability. What all of these examples clearly demonstrate is that hosting the Olympics is a massive undertaking. The decade of preparation requires meticulous planning, adaptability, and a vast allocation of manpower and resources. Each city has had unique obstacles, but one of, if not the largest, universal aspects which all hosts have to prepare for is constructing an athletes' village. Essentially, the village serves as a temporary residential complex specifically built to house the athletes, coaches, and trainers during the Olympic Games. In the host city contract, the IOC obviously goes to great lengths detailing specifications surrounding this facility. It covers everything from maximum permitted distance from sporting venues, to room dimensions, to room contents and village facilities. Capacity in these villages need to ensure they can accommodate the 11,000 athletes and 5,000 training personnel. As you can see, it is literally an entire village, designed and operated for no more than 3 weeks. Considering the events of the 2024 bid and other issues relating to the rapidly growing budgets of each passing Olympics, the IOC has gone to some length to find solutions. One thing that they have said, however, is that they plan to move away from the idea where venues and infrastructure is constructed for a single once-off use, in favor of using a city's existing facilities. It's uncertain how this will affect how future host cities prepare and what it'll look like in the future. One thing we can be sure of though is it's a huge process. Once again, thank you to Fume for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to get your free Fume base when you order the Journey Pack today. Thanks for watching.